Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Jesse, for the introduction. Like he said, I'm here on behalf of SBC Advising. We essentially are a group of small business owners or former small business owners that have kind of come together to add assistance to some of these great organizations that are around the state of Ohio. So what we're able to do is, especially in specific areas of expertise, we're able to kind of come in this circumstance, give some good presentations, and other circumstances, give some good advising for different types of companies all throughout the state. So really excited to come here to talk about QuickBooks, talk about some of the real good benefits that could give you as a business owner, answer some questions that you might have. So just want to make sure that we're adding an open forum for questions. Feel free at any point in time, if something I say comes up and sparks a question, if you came in here with a question and there's something that you wanted to say or see, feel free to type it in that box. We're watching it very closely. We can stop everything at any given time on a pin to answer or address that question if it's relevant. If not, we'll wait till we have a good stopping point and go ahead and address that question as well. But like he was saying, here on behalf of like you see in a small corner, we're here to really talk about QuickBooks. If you're considering it, kind of what the pros and cons are, the different types of QuickBooks that there are. We'll go a little bit into some of the specifics as to the modules and things like that you can expect from QuickBooks Online, which in my opinion, my recommendation is one of the most flexible and user-friendly owner-operator types of accounting softwares out there. So we're going to have a chance to kind of look into it. You will have a chance to kind of see the movements and where things can go and things like that. And like I said, if you have any questions, concerns, difficulties understanding any of this type of stuff, this is the place to ask. So there's no such thing as a bad question. More than happy to answer any and all questions. So really excited to start this, so we can go ahead and move this forward. So we're here on behalf of Impact Columbus. Thank you very much for having me and having us. Make sure that at the very end, you get the information of the people that are involved here. A lot of different wonderful services that they're providing, a lot of different certifications they're going to help you with. Make sure you're getting the most out of this presentation, and as well as the team that is here as well. So just want to take a quick a poll for kind of who's out there. Let's utilize this chat for this. So just want to see, what's your current bookkeeping arrangement? It could be nothing, it could be something, but if you can just type in the chat kind of what your current bookkeeping type of system looks like. So I currently use QuickBooks. If you're that person, I currently use another bookkeeping software. I have a business bookkeeper, or you want to start using something. Just want to get a feel for kind of what the room looks like as far as where your QuickBooks management or just financial management currently lies, just so we can read the room and kind of see, what type of group we're dealing with here. We'll give you guys about 30 seconds to type that in. Oh, we got a QuickBookser. All right, we got one. Anyone else? Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Shelton. The past one to start again. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So we got a good range of people that are currently using it. See, we got some people that are looking to use it, but so you're in the right place. Really excited to dig into this some more. Kind of give you guys a good feel for maybe some things that might have changed had you not used it before, and things like that. So thank you very much for those responses. And we can go ahead and keep moving forward. So let's start with just an overview of QuickBooks. What is QuickBooks? Who does it come from? What can it do? Who does it serve? All those types of questions. So just looking, it's owned by Intuit. And so they have a lot of different softwares that they've began to acquire. For example, Mint.com is one that does personal finance. TurboTax is something that almost everyone's touched. One of their more recent acquisitions is T-Sheets. So essentially, it's a really strong timekeeping software. So especially for those of you that have these and things, if you want to start adding time tracking into it and you have QuickBooks, one of their other softwares of T-Sheets allows you to do that, and it kind of makes some automatic entries and things like that. But all that to say, QuickBooks is accounting software. It's bookkeeping software, but because it's with Intuit, it kind of does a lot more. And it does so in a way that's very user-friendly. As an accountant myself, I've dealt in about 20 plus softwares, and it can get very clunky and kind of flexible, but QuickBooks is really the creme de la creme when it comes to managing your books and your financials as an owner operator. The level of knowledge that you have to have in order to go in and make somewhat complex transactions in some circumstances is relatively easy by how they set up these banking feeds, how they set up the particular modules. But the one thing with QuickBooks that kind of really shoots people in the foot, if you may, is that they give you this wonderful software with all these great features, but they don't really give you a chance to really learn, how do I use it? Or what's really relevant to me? Because there's all these different modules and all these different things that you can do, but what are the things that are most relevant to you? And so in this, when we go a little bit later, we'll talk about some of those relevant things for the owner operators that we have dealt with at SBC, and talk about, what are those different things? So as you might go back into QuickBooks or things like that, we can drop some breadcrumbs for you and answer some questions that might make that transition as smooth as possible. For the person that's currently in QuickBooks, we hopefully can add some clarity to some areas where that you might have, had some questions, or that might have been, ambiguous in should I use this? Should I need to use this, or what have you? So make sure, again, to ask those questions as we begin to really go through this, so we can really attack any of those points head on. And you can leave this session with more knowledge and more comfortability in using this type of software than you had before. So then there's additional services can be integrated, like we talked about, with T-sheets and things like that. There's a lot. I mean, there's really a lot. I don't know if any other software has as many as QuickBooks does, as things that integrate into it. What's another good example of that? If you have a product-based service, you do retail, there's, Commerce Sync is one of the biggest kind of inventory management types of softwares. You can synchronize your inventory into QuickBooks. So in real time, as you're scanning things or making sales with your clients and things like that, it's automatically integrating those types of entries and that type of economic activity into your books. So all that to say, QuickBooks is a very powerful software, but you got to know how to use it, or at least you have to know the right questions to ask to get the information that you're looking for. So many users globally. One thing you want to really consider as you're selecting any type of accounting software or just software period for your business is how many people use it, because there's certain things as you're trying to. There are so a question just came in real quick. Is there a version for construction contractors? There's several different versions we're going to go over in a little bit. And there's actually more so specific modules and specific areas that you're going to want to look at, as opposed to a specific type of construction software. There's wholesaling and manufacturing types of QuickBooks desktop software, but specifically for the reasons of people that are in construction, typically QuickBooks Online has sufficed for what they're looking for. And more so, we talk about the setup of your chart of accounts. We talk about the how you're entering your transactions. In most circumstances, you have invoice activity as opposed to your traditional sales receipts. So talking about what that looks like, how you enter and manage it, is more so how we attack people that are in construction businesses, as opposed to those that might have retail stores, those that might be in professional services and things like that. So not a strictly construction contractor type of software, while they might have for other ones, but there are specific things and ways that you can manage your QuickBooks Online that makes managing a construction or contractor type of business very easy to do. Does that answer the question? What? Perfect. So continuing on, there's three different types, like we just kind of dipped into: desktop, self-employed, and QuickBooks Online. So within those, there are multiple types as well. So if we're talking about, I think you can merge with some. Yes. Most major payroll systems have a way to integrate into QuickBooks. QuickBooks does have its own payroll type of software they try to push on you. I would say, at least in my experience, the one thing that QuickBooks does. Okay, so let's take one step back. With payroll processors, certain payroll processors will kind of do everything on their side, and they'll send one debit to your account for your taxes and one debit to your account for all your payroll expenses, so the dollars that are actually going to the employees, and then they'll automatically remit that to the proper authorities. QuickBooks Payroll, like the one that's in QuickBooks, the module that they have, books liabilities for it, and then has you kind of square those up or pay those to the proper authorities, or they'll charge an extra fee to do that for you. And so, at least in my experience, most people have not actually used the payroll module within QuickBooks, whereas they actually use ADP, Gusto, Patriot Payroll, one of those other payroll systems that they kind of aggregate all that activity for you. Your employees are able to go in and put in their hours And from an accounting perspective, you just have two expenses that hit your account as opposed to creating more liabilities and more things that you might have to check in at the end of the month. So all I have to say, yes, it does integrate with several different payroll processing softwares. And depending on your payroll processor, an actual integration is not even necessary, only because if it hits the bank account and your bank is synchronized, as we'll talk about a little bit later on, that's the only transaction that needs to come into your books. And that economic activity from payroll is actually being captured from the banking module, as opposed to having to integrate any type of accounting software or things like that. So all to say, QuickBooks does have its own solution. In my opinion, it's a little bit clunky in comparison to the kind of streamlined approach other payroll processors have. But all that to say, with QuickBooks, you have more flexibility to work with ones that might integrate directly into it from an application or software perspective, or just from a cash in, cash out going from the business. The banking module will capture that information if by chance it doesn't have a direct application integration, as I said, with like T-sheets or something like that from before. Did that answer the question, Jesse, or just the comment? Perfect. So
No,
go ahead.
I was just saying it was just a comment, and I have seen that, so like for certified payroll for like prevailing wage and things like that, I've seen it merge in with other softwares that contractors use as well outside of just that payroll component. So like
Gotcha.
Textura, Bluebeam. I mean, there's a couple of things that the contractors use that I know that it does work and it's very compatible. So whoever asked the question about does it work for contractors, it can help with purchase orders and things along those lines too. So yes.
Perfect. So yeah, desktop, self-employed, and QuickBooks Online are the three different types you're looking at. Most of the time, QuickBooks Online will suffice for what you're looking for. As far as desktop, I would say pre-COVID, desktop really had a large separation from QuickBooks Online in the types of functionality that it had. I think over the past year and a half, 2 years, they've really upped the ante on QuickBooks Online and the things that it can do. Even from inventory management, which is one of the biggest advantages people use QuickBooks Desktop. A lot of that stuff can now be managed within QuickBooks Online. A big advantage of QuickBooks Online over QuickBooks Desktop as well, if you bring in an outside bookkeeper or accountant, you will not have to have remote desktop capabilities or remote software in order for them to access your books as it was in the past. For most people that still use QuickBooks Desktop, it's because they had QuickBooks Desktop 2013 and they've been upgrading every single year and they're just in QuickBooks Desktop. But at least for most companies that I've seen start new, QuickBooks Online has been able to meet all the needs that they're looking for. If you're kind of a sole practitioner, whether it's professional services or what have you, and you're more so a one person shop, that self-employed QuickBooks self-employed actually could be a good solution for you. What it kind of does is instead of it structuring the chart of accounts and the different activities and the modules as a full company, it looks as you more so as an individual, as a sole practitioner, and it kind of customizes the things that you can do and the things that you can interact with in a way that's more relevant to a self-employed person as opposed to an actual business enterprise or a full-go business enterprise. So the self-employed is an option, especially for people that it's just a one-person shop. It's looking to stay a one-person shop. Maybe you were doing something in private industry and decided to go out on your own and do it yourself. QuickBooks self-employed will be a great option for you. Like I said, it's more of a stripped down version that attacks more so the things that are relevant to a self-employed person as opposed to your more traditional business enterprise. But we can continue to move forward and just kind of look at some of the basics that are behind QuickBooks, kind of what's going on, what you can expect from it, and things like that. But just to look real quick to give you an idea of what QuickBooks looks like from a pricing perspective. If you're looking at QuickBooks, you have several different options that it gives you. And we're looking at QuickBooks Online right now, just to make sure you're in the right place. This is for QuickBooks Online. This is what you can expect to pay per month. Look, they usually give you, like 3 months. Either you can pay now, you can get a discount for a couple months, or you can try it free for an entire month. The one thing to note is that they will not let you access your QuickBooks on day 31 if you do not decide to pay And so all that information that you could have potentially put would be lost unless you decide to pay. So they kind of hold it hostage from you for that 30-day trial period. So it's something to consider if you want to dip your toe in it and see how it feels, is that all that work could be lost for nothing if you decide, I don't think I want this. They will not let you into that QuickBooks profile. So one thing to note with that. But you'll see right here, it selects it for if it was if you were deciding to pay now. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll go ahead and look at the full price of it, because after 3 months, this is what you would be looking at. But essentially, you pay more for the types of features that you might need. So for most business enterprises, Essential or Simple Start is exactly need to kind of get your things going, get your entries in, begin kind of your overall financial management process. So again, Simple Start or Essentials are kind of the ones that really stick the most. What types of features do these things offer you? Of course, your basics of being able to enter your income and expenses. That's a standard. Invoices and payments is kind of the same exact thing, but if it's a bill activity or invoice activity instead, making sure you can pull your different types of reports. Enhanced reports for most owner operators, the general reports have been more than enough for what they need, even mileage tracking, different estimates, but you start to see differences if you need multiple users to come into your QuickBooks, if you start to bring time tracking into the equation, if you have several bills that are being received and not being paid instantly, it'll track and remind you as to, all right, you need to pay this bill. It's now 30 days due and things like that. So as an owner operator, it kind of gives you more of an assistant type of services and reminding you about the things that otherwise might be floating in your head or in a calendar somewhere. So it just tries to make things a lot easier for you, but they're going to charge you more for those types of services as well. If you're looking for more types of software and more types of flexibility from it, you can also add inventory management. So I spoke very briefly on how QuickBooks Desktop has wholesaling and different types of manufacturing QuickBooks Desktop software customized for that. You can now do some of that stuff relatively efficiently in QuickBooks Online, but you would have to get the higher tier of service with that. So what does it look like when you have inventory management and things like that in here? When you create an invoice, you can apply that to a certain product or service. And as that invoice is created, it would subtract that from your inventory. So essentially you're entering your inventory, you're booking your types of sales activity. And then as you book that, it makes the proper adjustments in real time for you. So again, the common theme I hope you can see from QuickBooks is that a lot of the different things that you would otherwise have to do yourself if you were managing your financials, and maybe another type of bookkeeping software, if you were managing your financials in any other type of way, some of these things might be more manual tasks that QuickBooks tries to cut out the middleman for and tries to remind you of, to make it an easier type of way to manage your business. But all to say, there's a lot of strong advantages that QuickBooks has, and even for this advanced one, they really kind of throw everything else at you. So looking at data restoration, workflow automation, these different types of things can be really strong things that you can use for your business. But for the most part, most enterprises I've seen, these aren't too relevant, at least in the very beginning. As you begin to try to scale, and especially like I said, workflow automation and things like that, it becomes a lot more of a useful tool. But especially in the beginning, for the most part, Simple Start or Essentials has been able to manage most of business owners' needs, at least in my experience. The one thing I wanted to note as well, if we come down here, you'll see QuickBooks Self-Employed. I mentioned that as well. So it's a lot cheaper if we compare. You're looking at $25 a month for the Simple Start, the first one for your business enterprises. If we're talking about self-employed, instead that's about at $15 a month. And then we took off all the discounts. This is the full price, just to give you an example of what that looks like. So you can see that a lot less this can do instead of the Simple. But if you're a self-employed, a one-person shop, sole proprietor, this might be all you need. So just looking at tracking your income and expenses, your basic reports, your miles, just asking yourself kind of what business activities are you currently engaged in? What does that look like for you on a daily, monthly basis? And if you might not need, all of these different types of things, maybe try that QuickBooks self-employment and do the free trial and see if that's going to be enough for you. If there's some type of module that's missing, if you feel like there's a piece of information that you can't enter in an efficient way, then maybe you want to upgrade to that simple instead, to give you a better, kind of overall idea of what's going on in your business, and of course efficient ways to enter in your transactions, to manage your financials, and pull those reports that are most relevant to you. But ultimately, the common goal here is the common theme is 3 different types of QuickBooks. You have your desktop, you have your online, and then of course self-employed. Self-employed will still be online, but it's more of a stripped down version of QBO, what the short version is of QuickBooks Online. So just wanted to kind of give you a difference as to what the differences are, what you can expect from them. But ultimately, it's a conversation with you and yourself as a business owner. How much do I need to manage my financials, and what types of modules or features are most relevant to my business activities? So yeah, so different online tiers, we just kind of went over that, the different prices that can come from there, and the fact that there, additional features are available as the tiers advance. You can downgrade and upgrade in between any given month. So you're not really locked into it, but you are locked into it if you're utilizing a feature of a higher tier and you try to downgrade to a lower tier. That's something to consider. It's easier to go up than go down, but just kind of being incremental and as you're selecting your software and the things that you need in the beginning should keep you from having any of those worries in the future. So now we're going to take a second and actually go into QuickBooks. So we have a sample profile. I just want to show you around the different areas. If you went through the process of creating a QuickBooks profile, and kind of going in there, it's going to give you this blank screen. You're not really going to have a general idea as to who, what, when, where, why. So what we want to do is take a little bit of time is just to show you the different areas of QuickBooks. The hope is that you're comfortable in seeing the start menus, the different areas. If you have a certain type of transaction, you know where to kind of go to book that particular transaction. And especially with the banking feature, the advantages that will give you as a business owner in categorizing your expenses and organizing everything and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and open up. I guess I'll show you real quick what we'll do first. So we're going to show a couple different areas. So if you have an expense, what do you do with that? Where does it go? How do you house that? Where do you put the different types of people that you're paying cash out to or having bills received from? We'll also talk about your income and sales. There's 2 different types of situations where you might have income. So one is when cash is received, you'll have a sales receipt. And other times you might have income activity, especially we mentioned construction and contractors. You might have an invoice or an estimate for something that's going to happen in the future, but that stuff is going to be earned. You might have signed into an agreement with someone, and now that income or that revenue has now been earned, but maybe cash has not been received yet. So how do you identify the difference of that? Which module does that go into? And then the inverse of that, when we're talking about expenses, maybe you have a gas bill that was received, and you paid that instantly. How do you book that? We'll say you have a gas bill that was received. It's not due for the next 60 days, but you have the bill in your hand. What do you do with that? And how can you enter that into the system in a way that reflects the economic activity that's happening in your business in the period that these things happen? And then also, what are the types of features and things that these modules can give you to make managing these types of activities that I just said a little bit easier? So what we're going to do is we're going to come now into this QuickBooks sample profile, but I want to give a quick second. Any questions? I've said a lot about QuickBooks as a software, the different types of QuickBooks that we have, some of the advantages of certain types of QuickBooks over others, but any questions or concerns in the area of your QuickBooks options, or just specific situations you might be in right now in trying to either select a QuickBooks type for yourself or something like that. Oh, actually, we got a question here. Where can you purchase the QuickBooks? So you can go to quickbooks.intuit.com, and it will bring you to a screen very similar to this. So if you look up here, let's see, we got quickbooks.intuit.com/pricing. But if you go to quickbooks.intuit.com, it'll bring you to a screen that looks just like this. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to go to plans and pricing. When you go here, it'll give you the option that we just looked at of the different ones. And you can make the decision of would I rather, not pay for 30 days and have a chance to really, try this type of stuff, or do I want to pay instantly and save money over the next 3 months? So it's kind of what you want to do, or what feels the best to you. But once you choose your actual plan, it'll kind of make you try to or ask you if you want to add these different things. And this is payroll, you're seeing benefits and things like that. For the most part, depending on what your activities are, you don't need this just yet. So again, we went through the process of selecting a plan. They try to get you to add payroll and other things like that, and then it will get you to the checkout. From there, if you've already made a QuickBooks profile before, sign into your current Intuit profile. So Intuit has a sign-in that goes across most of their applications, or most of the different types of apps. And in certain circumstances, if you might have had something in another Intuit type of site or something like that, there already might be an existing profile for your email. So try first to sign in using the email that you use the most for your business. If not, you should just be able to make a new one. But in certain circumstances, when people are trying to set up their QuickBooks profiles, they have issues signing in or logging in because there's already an existing profile on their email. So just be cognizant of that. Ask yourself the question, have I, created QuickBooks before, even if it was a couple years ago and things like that? Do I have an existing QuickBooks email? It might seem something that's small, but it can drive you mad when you're trying to go into the screen that actually gets you into QuickBooks and it spits you back out of the home screen and things like that. So just making sure that before you pay anything or before you go into a free trial, that the email that you have is active and is not currently being used in QuickBooks. Because if that's the case, it might try to create a new profile for you while one already exists, and that can create an error which will not allow you into your QuickBooks in the ways that you're trying to actually use it. Usually you have to, in that circumstance, you have to go through support, then they end up deleting one and creating the other, or clearing one, whatever they do in the background, and then you're going to be able to enter. But either way, the thing that happens there is you're not able to enter into your QuickBooks until later on, which kind of takes out the fire that was in you to actually enter in those transactions to do those certain types of things. So just being cognizant of that might seem like a little point, but that can really, really, really just stall out your progress if you don't take that one small step. But does that answer your question? Okay, I'll assume yes. Okay, perfect. Good. So now we're gonna journey into this sample profile. And again, if anyone else has any questions, keep hitting that chat. We'll make sure to catch those points and answer them accordingly. But now we've come into this sample profile. So if we look here and look at kind of what's going on, you'll see it always will spit you out at this dashboard. Let's look real quick at what's going on in this dashboard, because there's certain things that you'll immediately notice, and there's other things that'll always be hidden from you unless you just have time to click random things in here. The one thing you'll notice here is it'll always put you on this get things done. A lot of business owners, a lot of owner operators love this portion because it has almost everything you need on this one screen. So certain things you'll see right here are kind of blacked out. It's because we're utilizing this sample profile. But most of the modules that are over here that have different types of uses and functions are actually all communicated on a single page. So especially in the area of paying the bills that you're entering, of receiving payments on invoices that might be outstanding, if you have employees or just doing it for yourself, tracking time, all these different types of things are all on a single page. One of the strongest things, or one of the strongest pieces of this software that is easily accessible for you is actually this piece down here. If you have multiple people managing your books, you have a bookkeeper doing some stuff for you, or you're constantly in your QuickBooks, but maybe not remembering everything you did, this activity log right here, it's essentially an audit log, will tell you everything that's happened in QuickBooks since you've had QuickBooks. So especially when I'm dealing with business owners that might have existing QuickBooks, and we're talking about situations where something might have been booked to the wrong account, or something might have been put in a placeholder account and you forgot you did it. It says ask my accountant, you put in miscellaneous expenses. You're like, what did I do? How did that get there? This right here will give you exactly what you need. It might take some scrolling to get to the point that you need to get to, But essentially, everything that's ever happened in here will be put in this audit log. So whether you add something, delete something, modify something, all of those different things will always be here. So especially in the area of creating, so right here we're talking about them adding products or services. We talked about inventory management. It'll give you the list of how you added those different types of things. So many different types of areas or mistakes can be caught or at least researched in this audit log. But you access this audit log either, excuse me, let me get this back up, by either going up here to this magnifying glass, and this is the catch-all. This is how you can find anything and everything that you're looking for. Even you can type in a kind of half a word, it'll find it for you. Or you can go to your dashboard and this view all activity or see all activity will get you there. That's one of the tools that QuickBooks kind of has that is not easy to find, that they don't talk about for you, but it can be a very, very powerful tool in the area of trying to investigate something that could have went wrong. There's a couple extra things that you can do, and I'll try to squeeze that in towards the rear end of this to give you a nice tip as to how you can investigate these potential error transactions if time allows. But that's one of the first tools that they don't talk to you about that often. It's hidden in the bottom right corner, but it's also a very powerful tool as well. So again, mention the dashboard. Every time you come into QuickBooks, you're going to see this nice screen. It's going to allow you to interact with the different relevant areas of your company in real time and all on one screen. So it's a very useful tool that a lot of business owner operators like to use, even seeing reports and things like that. You don't have to navigate this menu nearly as much, which can become overwhelming. And if you look here real quick, if we come to this gear up here and we have this view, you can end up in two different views depending on which one is your default, or you could accidentally maybe click something. And so what could happen is, okay, you sign in on Sunday at 2 p.m., which is your admin time, and you come over here, and this is not even the screen that you're used to. You're like, what happened? What is going on here? I can't recognize this. However, you'll notice the dashboard is still the same. So one thing that is very easy with this is that this is very predictable. It's going to pop up like this regardless of which menu screen you select. But one thing just to show you again, you can differ from an accountant view to a business view. The business view is usually the default. But when we're talking about these modules that you move about to manage your financials and things like that, unless you are able to kind of differentiate which one is which, you might have a oh crap moment when you sign in. But all to say, if you utilize this dashboard in the beginning, that will never happen regardless of what could happen, as far as the modules and how it sets up your menu, depending on what setting is there. So we talked about the get things done module, but then also we want to talk about this business overview. So one of the things that it gives you, this is kind of your accounting team. This is the team that gives you, this is what your CFO would give you if you had one on staff at the time, and you wanted to know what did I do in the last 30 days? What did I do in the last month? You'll find that these are, you can't customize these periods to anything that you'd want, but it gives you a snapshot in time based off of these standardized types of periods. So this year, last month, last quarter, last year, but you can't select, from September 14th to October 14th. You can do that in the reports module right here, but this is just a snapshot. But this snapshot gives you a lot of very good information. The one thing you'll notice down here, you can also access that audit log I talked about in this bottom right corner as well. This is not going to be in all of these different modules here, but it will be in both of these screens in your dashboard. But you'll see it'll give you a snapshot of your profit and loss. A very important question you want to know at any given point in time. Your expenses, how much cash am I shelling out? Or this also includes bill activity. So I'm receiving bills for things, I'm shelling out cash for things. What's the aggregate of that economic activity? Right here, it'll give you that. And it will split it out based off of your most used categories. So you can see, they're putting the most in maintenance, they're putting the most in cost of goods sold activity, and then legal and professional services. It's a very helpful type of thing to see this in a very snapshot type of way. Even invoice activity, being able to track who owes me, who hasn't paid me yet, how much have I invoiced out? Those types of things you can see. You can't go into who and those specifics in here, but it gives you the snapshot that you would need. So this is still a very powerful tool. If you're just signing in for a second to kind of see something in between, maybe serving customers, in between maybe going to view an estimate, to know, where do I currently stand? Last but not least, you'll see over here sales. It'll give you all of your revenue activity, again, based off of these kind of predetermined periods, but you'll be able to get that snapshot. The last thing you'll see over here are your bank accounts. So this will give you whether your bank account is connected to a book. I mean, whether it's connected to a bank, and I'll show you what that means in a second, or it's just been entered manually in your chart of accounts, like this one is right here. You'll be able to see what is my current bank balance, what are the balances on my current credit cards, and you'll be able to see that kind of snapshot once again as to, what's going on, what's happening in my business. And again, a very, very healthy snapshot. So just looking at, the different types of things that this can do, this is a very powerful tool that they don't always tell you to utilize, or tell you how to utilize in a way that's healthy. So as long as you're entering your transactions in a way that's productive, in a way that's consistent, in a way that's efficient, these things should begin to be updated on a transactional basis, in a way that can give you the types of insights that you need for your business, based off of whatever you've been entering. So we talked about that, but then let's talk about actually entering in these transactions. You have two different types of ways where you can enter in transactions. One I would call more automatic, which is one of a very, very powerful tool that QuickBooks allows. And certain softwares will allow you to sync your bank. Other ones, it's still completely manual. So, or the banks that they have supported are just not near what QuickBooks can allow. So there's two ways. So again, automatic is this banking fee. So we're going to start about that one first, and then we'll talk about the other way you can enter transactions if that's not the case. So if we're talking about here, this banking feed is just one of the most powerful tools that QuickBooks has. This is one of the things that makes QuickBooks just the creme de la creme, like I said in the very beginning, in that it allows you to put an accountant or bookkeeper for you, but very, very quickly. So if you look here, you can see that you can connect your bank accounts to QuickBooks. So essentially, when you do so, it'll take you to a screen that will bring up, every different type of bank account that currently exists, like the Chase, Huntington, what have you. If you have a smaller credit union, so maybe, I don't know, Great Lakes Credit Union. I don't know if that's a real one or not, but some type of small local credit union, they may not be supported by QuickBooks. And if so, the more manual way that we'll go over very briefly will be your better option to entering your types of transactions. And again, we're just breezing over the different ways to utilize this software. We're talking about how to do certain things from a high level perspective, just so you have a feel for what QuickBooks can do for you, and ultimately how this type of information flows into these reports that gives you all the information that you might need to manage your business efficiently. So that's timing out for us. But essentially, you're able to connect your bank account the same way you would sign into your bank online. You would connect it here, and then from that point, it will categorize or load all of your transactions. So if we look here, this is kind of the culmination of that synchronization that we talked about. So you loading your bank account. You come here, it'll tell you the last time it synced. So they're saying it just synced, a second ago. And then it will give you a number of transactions that have popped up in the bank account, but have not yet been entered into your books. This is essentially a reconciliation process that QuickBooks does for you in real time. At the end of any given period, it's good practice to reconcile your books with your bank statements to see, is everything that's happening in my bank actually entered into my books? QuickBooks allows you to do this every single time you sign in to categorize your transactions. So at the end of any given month, when you actually would reconcile your books to ensure that, again, the things that are happening, the cash that's coming out of my bank, I'm accounting for all of this in my book, it's happening in real time. Again, it's syncing the transactions from your bank. It's putting them in a way that's clear and concise, and allowing you to add them transaction by transaction. So one of the things that happens behind the scenes is that as you click add, it automatically confirms this transaction came from the bank, has been entered into the book. By the end of each month, you typically have a 2-minute process to reconcile your books, as opposed to something that would otherwise take an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours in more traditional types of reconciliation processes. So once again, we're talking about being able to confirm that everything, that all the cash that's moving in and out of your bank account is being accounted for in your books. Almost instantly, QuickBooks allows you to do that. So this banking fee is more of an automatic way of booking your transactions. And one additional step that you can take to kind of make this an automatic type of process are these different rules. So if we look here, let's see if we can find a good example of a rule. Okay, so we got no rules here, but one thing that you can do essentially is you can create a rule for a type of transaction. So what that essentially means is you're able to, when any money comes or goes out of your checking account, so as you sync it, it says something came out in some type of amount from this type of person, you can automatically set it to categorize it to a certain type of expense. What that means is the thought process of you as a business owner sitting down on Sunday at 2 p.m., the thought process of you having to sit down, look at your transactions and categorize them has now been cut to a fraction of the time, because essentially you're taking the time to set a certain type of rule in place. So let's just say it's just utilities, and let's save. And now instead, change. You'll see with this banking module, this powerful tool I keep mentioning, you're now, every time any type of transaction comes from this person, you're now able to set it to a given trend. I just put any account. That probably wouldn't be the best account for it, but you can now automatically, every time this comes in, click this one button, and it will file it away in the place it should be filed in. And so now when you pull your different reports and things like that, you're taking less time to book your transactions and more time to pull your reports, or maybe go to your dashboard and look at your high level insights. So again, something that would otherwise take a lot of time is now cut down to a fraction because of this type of module. And not every single type of software has this at all. And then the ones that do, maybe your Wave and some of the other newer types of accounting softwares, it can sometimes be clunky in either categorizing the expenses, entering the expenses, or that extra step of actually the reconciliation process that QuickBooks does automatically for you when you put transactions through here. That doesn't happen in those other softwares as well. Just a very, very powerful tool to use to enter in all of your cash related transactions that happen in any given account. The other thing you can do as well is you can do it with credit cards. So essentially, you can book your credit card accounts, and instead of it, leaving your cash balances, it adds to your credit card balance. So that would instead go up. But you're able to put these types of transactions directly on your profit and loss statement if it's an expense, or maybe you prepaid for some type of asset, and it will book that to the appropriate account, but then increase your liability in your credit card as opposed to taking from your bank. But you're able to set all this stuff up relatively easily. It walks you through with wizards, what you should click next, where you should go. And it's a very, very powerful tool. I can't emphasize in managing and in adding your transactions. If we're talking about where you have to enter something that was not related to cash. So we're talking about savings and checking. These types of transactions pop up because cash was involved, because we moved or we received or left cash. What do you do in a circumstance where cash might not be involved, but you need to book that type of thing to your books, or you need to get that economic activity into your system? And that's where these additional modules come in. To just summarize, we went to the dashboard and we looked at what was there. We went to the banking and we looked at the different things that you can do in there, how to kind of link that account and look around and lightly categorize. We breezed over that. But now we're talking about a situation of how you can book something when cash might not be involved. So there's two different modules that are most relevant to this. We're talking about the sales module here, and we're also talking about the expense module. So far we've touched dashboard, banking, sales, and expenses. We'll go into sales real quick. So if we come in here, you'll see QuickBooks, it gives you the same type of look, regardless of the modules that you're in. It gives you a very, very similar look, which is another thing that not all accounting softwares do. So again, let's go to the dashboard real quick. You'll see it kind of gives you a description of what's going on. It gives you these kind of sub modules you can navigate through. If we go to banking, it gives you a description up here. You have these sub modules that you can kind of go through. You have some information over here that you can interact with. And then of course you have your detail information down here. As we go to the sales module, it looks like the same exact type of setup. This is a very simple type of thing that these accounting softwares do not take into account all the time. And you get a completely different screen with different options and different buttons other places, but they try to make a very, very easy user experience in QuickBooks for owner operators to be able to manage their financials. So this should look familiar to the banking module we were just in. It should look familiar to the dashboard module that we were just in that it gives you kind of your summary of where you're at. And then it gives you your different options that you can select up here that were also the options that you could see right here. So these things right here are also going to be accessible once you're inside of the module and you can navigate in between those. Can you create a rule to automatically save for taxes or capital improvements? Yes. So you can automatically split a particular type of transaction. Let's go back real quick. So the question was, can you create a rule to automatically save for taxes or capital improvements? So one thing that you can do here, so say we have income. So we're talking about cash being received. So if we talk about this type of transaction, so it's from a rental, it's the company that it came from, so you just want to call it a rental. And it's not something you have to memorize now, but dropping breadcrumbs, so when you go through this, it's more familiar to you. That's kind of the goal that we're trying to have here. But a rental, we create that, and what you're able to do is you're able to add a split. And what you can do instead is you can split a certain amount to income, and then you can take the smaller amount of that and you can apply that to the appropriate tax account. So whether it's a liability account, however you set it up, whether it's a liability account, whether you want to put the expense in real time to put it on your profit and loss statement, whatever is most relevant to your business activities. I'm sorry, I'm ambiguous in saying it just depends. But depending on what the appropriate account is for you to withhold or set aside the taxes that would come from that income, you're able to set a rule to set a percentage from it. So if we did a percentage, you would say, I usually make about 78 cents on the dollar after taxes. I can account for that, or sales taxes. I'm actually, my sales taxes are inclusive. I'm going to take 7.5% of any income and we'll apply that directly to the liability account as opposed to it staying in income. So those types of things you're able to do in real time. And every time a transaction of cash comes in from a rental, you're then able to say, 7.5% of this will go to my sales tax liability account. Let's see if they have one in this circumstance. Let's see. I don't think they have one. Okay, we'll just say Department of Revenue. That's the one that's there, and then the remaining percentage was that 92.5% would go to the appropriate income account. So there's different ways you can do that, but all to say, to answer your question, yes, you can create a rule that will automatically split these types of payments in ways that will capture the economic activity in a way that's actually happening. For in this example, you're getting $1, but that dollar actually is 92 cents because sales tax is inclusive and needs to be pulled out. In a circumstance where it might be in the same circumstance, you might be receiving 107% of whatever your sales amount is. You need to lower your sales because ultimately half of that is being withheld. So in that same circumstance, you would kind of do it the same exact way, but you can set these rules to automatically account for your liabilities and things like that on an ongoing basis, depending on who the vendor is that you're receiving the cash from. The easiest part is if you always receive payments from Stripe or PayPal or something like that. That's the easiest way to capture that. If you're maybe receiving things a little bit different, let's see. Thanks for the question, Shannon. Let's see what's here. Great. I have a call center. I'm paid for my clients when I pay. Then I need to pay my contractors. When this bank fee comes through, it appears that I'm keeping all the revenue. If I do a split, can I demonstrate with a rule? Yes. So the same exact way. As long as you have or know the percentages or the dollar amounts by which it should be split, you're able to automatically set that rule. So in this example, you're paid from your clients. When you get that deposit, for the from the client in your bank feed, you're able to, like I said, come in here. Down here is where your rule is going to be, and you'll be able to, again, right here, add a split. And only add a split, more than likely the amounts are easier unless you're dealing with some type of taxes, especially if we're talking about contractors. And you'll set, so you can add a line as well. So say you're dealing with 6 contractors, you receive $1,000, you know, $400 of that is kept. 100 might go to each contractor or what have you. You're able to set it to the appropriate payroll liability account, depending on how you have that set up. It could be for individual companies, it could be for one whole company. But depending on how you do that, you can split them and you can add as many as you need to, and set them to the appropriate account. So then when it's sitting in that account, or in the appropriate liability account, you just need to make sure you close that liability whenever that person actually is paid from the services, whether it's 2 weeks or whatever your arrangement might be. But you're able to, like I said, go in, take that single transaction, create the rule to split it in a way that makes sense, as long as in this circumstance, you want to do percentages. If you one time you might receive 1,100, another time you might receive 1,000, another time you might receive 1,200. You want to do percentages. If you always receive 1,000, then maybe dollar amounts might make more sense, especially if what you're paying your contractors to fulfill that $1,000 type of revenue is the same and known. So whether you just need to have the information as to what the split looks like. And you'll be able to set that rule as long as it's coming from the same exact sources and things like that. Does that answer your question, Shannon? No, we can read through the typos, no worries. Okay, perfect. So like I said, let's see, what's our time? Okay, so we'll probably go for maybe 10, 15 more minutes, and then we'll leave it open for questions and things like that. But so we went in here and we were looking at the sales. So we talked about how this is somewhat the same as the other modules, in that you can kind of look around and see the same things that are going on. We have our detail towards the bottom. We have our modules at the top. It tells us what's going on up here. And of course, we can always toggle our menu up here. This will never leave. This is kind of the options and settings. This will always be the same regardless of what module you're in. But then up here will kind of be your difference with respect to that. That's how you interact with that specific module. So we talked about the bank accounts before. You saw some things up here that said link bank and things like that. Now we're in the sales, and now it's talking about either importing transactions. This is most relevant for people that are transitioning accounting software and things like that. This is more so for entering or entering certain types of transactions. What are the most relevant types of transactions for most business owners? Invoice and sales receipt. If you have invoices, the payments, this is how you apply payments manually to a specific type of invoice. Sales receipt is when you have any type of activity where you're receiving cash and you're giving some type of service or you're giving some type of product, and it's when cash is involved. Invoice is relevant when cash is not involved, and you apply cash to that invoice via this payment. If there are certain circumstances, you're in a service type of industry, maybe someone wants 1,000 of a product or a large purchase, you might send them an estimate. The estimate, it looks almost identical to an invoice within the module, except you can then convert an estimate to an invoice when it is confirmed that that person or that sale is going on. The big part of that that's very, very easy and streamlined through QuickBooks is it will email that person an invoice based off of the information you entered in that estimate. It will let you know when they opened it. It'll let you know when they paid it. Depending on what you set up, it will facilitate the payment collection through QuickBooks and make the appropriate entries through your banking fee when those funds are received. So again, a very streamlined process that would otherwise, or in certain circumstances, be a clunky or paper type of process. You have your paper estimate, that's good, you stamp it. Then you have your paper invoice, that's good, you stamp it. Then when you receive that, you get a receipt, you stamp it. All that stuff, you have a pile of papers on your desk that otherwise QuickBooks would try to keep completely electronic. So it's very, very nice to have these different types of features and things like that, because it streamlines a lot of the collection processes and booking processes that otherwise would be more so manual and less mechanical. But again, the things that you want to really know from this module is if you're in sales, if cash is not involved, you want to do an invoice. So another circumstance, you have a $10,000 construction contract. It's going to be payable in quarters. It's going to take you a year to fulfill it. It's going to be payable in quarters. You're going to use this payment module, or it's either going to come. So as payments are received for this invoice, it's either going to come through your banking fee in the automatic way we talked about, and you'll be able to apply those payments to that invoice through your bank fee. If by chance, you have a account that doesn't sync there, you just don't prefer to use it or whatever that might be, then you can take that manual payment once it's received, whether you receive the check or what have you, and you can apply it to the invoice. On the other side of that, say you have a $10,000 construction contract that's going to take 1 week to do. It's maybe an asphalt job or something like that. You can instead do the sales receipt, because now you have received the cash, you've given them a receipt for it. Because cash is involved, this sales receipt module instead will allow you to book directly to whatever expense account or whatever sales account was relevant to it, while also allowing you to deposit those funds to the appropriate checking account. So again, the theme of this one is if it's cash in, if it's sales activity, there's a couple modules that might be relevant to you. Cash is involved, sales receipt. Cash is not involved, we're talking about an invoice. To manually apply payments to an invoice, we're talking about payment. And then if there's an estimate involved prior to having to cut an invoice, you click that. And then let's see if we have an estimate in here. Let's see if we have an estimate. Yep. So as in any estimates, those are all already closed. So as an estimate, if it was open, you would be able to then convert it into an invoice. So it looked just like this and create an invoice. And you would create an invoice, and it would take all that activity or all the information that was put in that estimate. You could save and send it. It would email it to this person, and then they would be able to interact with the actual invoice in a way that's efficient and productive. But for the summary of that, that's what we're talking about, sales activity. Let's take a second and look at the expenses activity. We're flying through this. So if you have questions, let's ask. Can you switch from cash? Yes, you can switch from cash to accrual basis for reports. And what's the difference for that for certain people? What information might that give you that other ones might not? If you're talking about cash versus accrual, we're talking about utilizing information where cash is only involved. So in that invoice activity where we're talking about booking an invoice where we had $10,000 worth of information that's going to be payable over each quarter. If you selected your profit and loss statement and clicked accrual, you're going to see that 10,000 pop up as revenue that was booked that we haven't yet collected on, and that's going to pop up there. If you click cash instead, it's only going to show you the cash receipts you've received for that period. And how you can go about doing that, we'll go back to the expenses part real quick in a second. But in any report, it'll give you the opportunity to toggle right here. So cash, again, will only tell you when cash is involved. So you'll see everything just lowered. Why did it lower? Because there's invoice activity. If we go here real quick, let's go to the dashboard just to get a quick snapshot. If we look here, they have invoice activity going on in their business. There's invoices going on where they haven't yet collected the cash on it. They can say right here, $3,700 has not yet been is not even due yet, and then $1,500 should have been collected but hasn't been paid on. Even in certain circumstances, they have monies that have been received but not deposited. That should never happen for you. But all to say, there's a lot of things going on here, and that activity is being captured in your financial reports and being shuffled around and organized by QuickBooks in a way that you can just press a single button and it gives you those insights. So if you wanted to ask yourself, as the business owner, how much cash should I receive in sales? Click that button, boom, it'll tell you this is the stuff that's been received in your bank account. If we're talking about cash requirements, we're talking about being able to pay the bills, being able to keep the lights on. Cash is very, very relevant, but there's still insights that you might want to know of. What have I been doing? What has my business been doing overall in total? More than likely, if you're talking to external stakeholders, so talking to people that want to get you financing, maybe private investors. If you're talking about trying to get licensing and things like that, they're going to ask for accrual. So accrual is one of the things that they're going to ask for because they want to see everything. They want to know everything that's going on. In certain circumstances, you might be booking something that's going to get you cash later, and they want to see that type of stuff. But for you, the business owner, if we're talking about, again, keeping the lights on, if we're talking about being able to pay for your employees, your utilities, all those things that are going to cost cash, you're going to want to know how much cash am I receiving in any given period. And what this, these two very quick buttons will allow you to do is toggle. And what this does mechanically is every time you book something to a respective income account, and the inverse of that account has cash involved with it, it will throw it in here. In circumstances where you have booked invoice activity and you put a payment against that invoice, then that payment. So we talked about the circumstance. We had $10,000. You get $2,500 quarterly. We're talking about maybe mid-year. If you pulled a cash sales for the year, you'd have $5,000 in sales off of that invoice activity because you've received $5,000 from it. But it's giving you two sides of it. Again, the sales that initially just end up in cash, and then payments that have been received on invoices. But it's going to tell you when the cash was received, not when you booked the invoice. So again, if you booked the invoice on 1/1 of 2021, you received cash on 4/30 and on 6/30. If we're talking about when it says that cash was received, it's not going to say the cash was received when the sale was booked. It's going to say the cash was received when the cash was deposited or paid on that invoice. So a very distinct difference between your reports. And I hope I gave a general talk about the benefits of seeing both. If we're talking about external stakeholders, accrual is always going to be what you're interested in, what they're interested in. But as a business owner, again, understanding your cash requirements, how much you have, how much is moving in and out of your business, which is the most important question for most people. This cash button right here will break out anything that's going on that is not directly hitting your cash accounts to give you that level of information. So I'll take about 7 more minutes and we'll talk about the expenses part, and then we'll just open it up for questions. I hope you guys have thank you. I hope you guys have plenty of questions for me. I'm ready to answer, but let's talk about the expenses. So we talked about situations where cash is involved. We talk about situations where cash is not involved. It's the inverse, the same thing we just kind of went over, but now we're talking about when cash is either going out or cash is going to be going out because some type of bill has been received. So again, we talked about the dashboard, the banking, the sales, and the expenses. Right here, it talks about where we're at, what are we doing. We have the sub modules. If we come here, you see 2 options. And we have 2 options up here, similar to our other modules. Again, the same user experience is what QuickBooks gives us, which is one of its strongest advantages. Most people don't print checks anymore, but if you wanted to, you could print checks based off of the bills that are currently outstanding. So say you have an AEP bill that you've entered to the system, you haven't shelled out cash on it just yet, but you want to pay that bill, you can print a check directly from QuickBooks if that's something you want to do. But that's just kind of what this thing right here means for you. So the one thing you want to note in certain circumstances with QuickBooks, it'll give you a button like this is the button I selected, everything's been selected. This button instead, they split it into 2 buttons and they don't really tell you that it's that way. So if you want to get some additional options that are related to this, of course, click this arrow and this will give you the information for it. But if you want to actually do the thing that the button says, you'll just click that instead. These are small things, but these are areas of frustration I have gone through with business owners that they just were like, no one told me this. I didn't know I could do this. So just want to take a second for some of these points, even if it might seem remedial, just to because you don't know what you don't know. But all to say, the same way when we were in sales, we went to new transaction and we looked at the transaction types it gave us. Some of these should look familiar to what we just saw in sales in that time activity. There was some other things like that, but a lot of these are different. What is relevant to you? The same question we answered when we're talking about the sales module. What options are most relevant to you as a business owner? The one you're going to use the most, if you use it at all. And again, this is a circumstance where the bank feed is not being used. This expense. So the same way we talked about a sales receipt being if cash is involved. So I sell something, I receive cash and I give them a receipt for it. How do I book that in the system manually? You go to the sales receipt module. So you go to sales, all sales, new transaction, and you select sales receipt. The same way you invert it if cash is going out. If I'm kicking cash out directly for something, I receive a 20 gallons of gas and I paid nowadays $150 for however much that is. depending on what that is, you would instead select expense. Now, the same way we talked about an invoice, how cash is not yet involved, but we need to book that activity. We would select bill. So see bill as the inverse of invoice, and see expense as the inverse of sales receipt. So if we're talking about how do you manually enter in transactions, I think Jesse or someone can answer. Mr. Shelton had a question about the recording. I think Jesse or team can answer that one in the chat directly. But just talking about how that's the inverse of it. So how do I book these things if I can't flow it through my banking feed? Again, sales receipt for cash in or expense for cash out. So if we look in here, expense, let's come in here and see, this should look familiar. This module that allows you to deal with transactions will always give you this type of look. So we're going to go, no interruption at all. You're fine. Ask your questions. No worries. But you'll see the same exact thing. So we're going to go to the sales receipt one right after this, but you're going to see a couple things. You're going to see the name of what's going on. You're going to see who did you pay? How did you pay? The date. And again, how did you pay? This is actually going to deduct it from an account. This is for information purposes. So if you have ETFs, if you pay in wires, you're going to have to add a new one. But for everything else, your reference number, if that's going to be your check, if it's going to be your SWIFT information, if you're doing a wire, your ACH information, if you're doing an electronic payment, depending on whatever that is the information for that. You can tag these types of things. So especially if you're trying to group, so say you have a specific type of transaction or a specific type of project that you're putting things to, you can't group them together in ways unless you use this tag feature. So it's a very helpful thing as well. But what I'm trying to show you is that as you go into these modules, you should be looking at almost the same exact type of thing, the same exact type of setup. And that is one of the things that QuickBooks just does so well. So just look at this screen. In sum, I'm going to go over to the sales receipt side now. So we go out of here. Let's go to sales, all sales, new transaction, sales receipt. So now we're talking about cash in instead of cash out. This should look familiar to what we just saw in the expense module. In that, we now see who did we pay or who paid us, what's their email. This information will automatically come up. This tags we were just talking about is back again. So if you wanted to group, like I said, two transactions related to a specific project or a specific purpose, whether it's cash in, cash out, bill activity, invoice activity, you just create a tag and say, hey, this is my project A, and you could create a tag for it, and it would group together these transactions in ways that you can report, you can pull in reports activity that happened just to those types of transactions or that project. But you're able to group those things together. You have your project, your actual service, you can select your rate, and then down here in the bottom, it'll allow you to save and send. It's the same look. Regardless of where you're at or what you're doing, you should still be able to see that familiar type of look and things like that. So it's just very helpful software, very familiar software, very user-friendly software that you're able to use and manage your business. Because ultimately, if we're being real and honest with ourselves as business owners, it is difficult to manage your business and manage your finance at the same time. And so the reason why QuickBooks is just so highly recommended for owner operators is that it makes managing your business as little as possible and as cheap as possible, because you could pay a QuickBooks bookkeeper $200, $400, $500 a month to do this stuff for you, but you can't guarantee it's done right, depending on who you get. And also, you don't really know what's going on if you're not in the weeds of your business. But if we're talking about the banking feed of automatically flowing in your transactions, creating those rules, or understanding circumstances where you might have to manually enter something in, that's what we talked about, the bill or the invoice if cash isn't involved, or the expense in the sales receipt if cash is involved. If you understand those basic principles and understand which accounts you need to book your things to, 75% of the work is done for you right there. And then you're instead paying a professional for assurance at the end of the year, come tax time or at the end of a certain period. Hey, am I doing everything right? And you're paying them for 2 hours of assurance as opposed to 20 hours of work, which is just night and day to your books, to your finances and things like that. So I've talked a lot. I want to go ahead and open the floor for questions, concerns, difficulties based off of your specific QuickBooks situations, things that you might be interested in or want to inquire about, anything and everything. I want to go ahead and open the floor for that.
Maurice, I would say first, thank you before any other questions that come through. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
You know, I think you deserve to grab a drink of water right now. That was pretty awesome, man. Way to go in. If everybody that's here can understand and feel the passion that Mr. McGee has for not only this service, but for what he does as a profession, I think you can just see it shine through that, he's very knowledgeable, very passionate, and I'm very appreciative. I'm sure everybody else is on the call for what you've done. I'm sure people probably want to know what does it take to hire you, right? Because I know we have your bio, but if you can, please put your contact information in the chat line for everybody. That'd be very, very helpful. So again, Mo, you opened up for questions. I know one thing that I'd asked on the My Experts function. Who are some of the experts that you can get a hold of through the QuickBooks service, or is that just referring somebody to your lawyer or your accountant or anybody that's
So they have a kind of a program where they put people through like QuickBooks trainings and certifications. They'll give them the badge and allow them into the bucket or a grouping of QuickBooks experts and bookkeepers. But honestly, in my experience, it's a crapshoot. I mean, you kind of get who you get, and everyone's bio is going to be together. But there's a lot of people that are in it, just being frank and honest, that are just getting started and that have a really good, they can really mess up your books. So it's kind of, so in understanding and bringing someone else into your QuickBooks, it's you still got to have that base level of knowledge yourself to at least be able to hold someone accountable. And usually in the process of doing that, with how easy QuickBooks can be to manage, you end up doing the work yourself. But all to say, you can't have a good relationship with your bookkeeper that they can set you up with, because I guess they have thousands. I mean, they really have thousands that you can ask for a specific type of industry and things like that. But it just depends. Sometimes you can see reviews on someone and things like that. But ultimately, they'll connect you with an expert that's in their network that they've kind of trained and grouped together themselves. But there's just no guarantee as to how good they are, how knowledgeable they are, and ultimately how much care they're going to give your business. All those things I think are equally important when it comes to managing that QuickBooks experience. But one thing I guess I can also note that is an advantage of QuickBooks Online over the other ones is that you can look at the QuickBooks in real time. So you can see, all right, in certain circumstances, I recommend business owners make a ghost transaction, put it in the wrong account, and just let it sit. See how quick it goes. See how long it goes for it to actually be addressed. In certain circumstances, you at your year-end financials, and there's something hanging in, I don't know, telephone expenses, and you never, book any telephone expenses to your things, and you can tell right there that either one of those 3 points I talked about of the care or things like that is not being taken. But ultimately, having that base knowledge of QuickBooks, of knowing, where the transactions go. Let me pull these reports. Let me understand when my reports were 2 weeks ago. This is where they're at now. What differed? Why did it differ? Those things are still important. There's no way around it for business owners, I would say. And so even in getting that expert, I think people still need to make themselves a soft expert in understanding what's going on in their books, because it's a slippery slope. And once you're uncomfortable with your financials, everything else starts to fall apart. And so really just making sure you're on top of that and you're doing the most you can to educate yourself on your QuickBooks, on your numbers, on your specific activities, so that if someone else, an expert, is being brought into the equation, you can hold that person accountable for the dollars that you're spending for them to be in your books and things like that. Does that answer the question?
So what I've heard is trust but verify, right?
Boom, boom.
There is a such thing as embezzlement. If you have no base knowledge of what you're doing in this software right here, and you're trusting it to go to somebody else just for them to be able to do anything. I mean, even the president trusts his most trusted, he even checks on his most trusted general, right? So make sure that you can do that. In my career, I've seen people, that have just said, I'm really good at my business. I want somebody to take this and run with it, and I don't want to do anything with it. And it has cost them, severely, in some capacity or another, where either they ended up triggering an audit function, or somebody, stole some money from them and they didn't see it until it was too late. So, very, very valid point. It is good to have You don't have to be expert, right? But, I think, who is it, Shannon, that uses QuickBooks right now? If you're having somebody else that's looking into that, hopefully some of these things and tips that Mo shared with us today, I learned some things today for sure, but these are some things that you can look out for. That ghost transaction, that's a gem right there, Mr. McGee. I like that. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem. And especially if people have something, a question hits you in a week or something like that, shoot me an email. Even if it's very specific, I'll take the time to answer. So even if it's, I'm in this transaction, we talked about in our pre-meeting, the depreciation expense. I'm trying to make sure I'm depreciating my assets. How can I look to see what assets that I have? How do I book those in there? I'll help you out with that. It's not a problem. More than happy to help, because ultimately the amount of money that you save knowing how to do this yourself, whether you do it or not, the amount of money, time, and worry that you save is just, it's night and day. And as someone that I used to own a electronic repair business downtown. I had a shop for about 2 years, and I was still an accountant in trade. It was a hobby that just blew into something else. As an accountant that knew accounting, I still struggled to manage my own financials while managing my business 8 to 12 hours a day. And so I understand how important and how pivotal and how devastating it is when these things don't come together in the way that you want them to, because it's devastating to you if you don't know the specifics of where your cash is going, how you can plan for the next 6 to 12 months. These basic things, it's a hard thing to do. So really giving you in the information, the knowledge, and beginning to set the cadence as to how you can manage this in a way that's sustainable is so important to me. So it meant a lot, Jesse, when you said I was passionate about it. This stuff means a lot to me. And ultimately, this back office is just as important as the front office. The same with NBA, NFL teams. If the manager isn't together, they're going to bring anyone in and they're going to tear up the team, and you're 0-10 for the year. So just taking these things into account, I think, can really save you a lot of time, money, energy, and ultimately stress, because this business stuff, is entrepreneur life, is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. So as much tools that you can add to your tool belt to make it as easy and as smooth as possible, I think is worth the time, effort, and money. Definitely.
Great.
I guess while we have 4 minutes left, if there are any other questions for Mr. McGee, I thank you for extending yourself, to answer questions later. If anybody else on the call is like me, as soon as we hang up, you're like, I forgot about something, right? So, or you may have a specific question about your business that you don't want to put out here, on the live recording. So, again, thank you so much. These are the things that we do here at the Impact. If you have not sat down with us individually, feel free to reach out and schedule some time. But again, the executive education series is powerful in content because it gets like-minded people, entrepreneurs. You are a special breed, and it takes a lot to be an entrepreneur. And when you can think and talk and speak with like-minded individuals, iron sharpens iron. I'll put it that way for you, right? So. That's all I have. Thank you for organizing this, Ms. Sharon. All the attendees, be blessed, stay dry.
All right, everybody, have a good evening now.
Have a good day.